I was folding silk scarves into my suitcase when my phone buzzed. One message, 5 words. You are not coming. Caleb insists. That was it. No explanation, no apology, just erasure. Like I never existed. My name is Virginia Harper. I'm 68 years old, a retired English teacher who once believed that a mother's sacrifices would be remembered. That love, if poured fully and freely, would one day return. I booked the trip. I planned every stop in Italy, Rome, Florence, Venice, every cafe, every charming street. It was our dream, mine and my daughter's, and yet there they were, in my photos, at my restaurants, in my memories, without me. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about realizing you were never truly seen, and what happens when a mother chooses silence. Not to surrender, but to rise. The sea air had a certain stillness in the mornings, a quiet that pressed gently against the windows of my little home on the Oregon coast. It wasn't loneliness, not exactly. It was more like the soft echo of a life that had slowed down. I woke every morning to the same rhythm. Coffee brewing, gulls calling, the hush of the waves breaking below. At 68, routine had become a kind of comfort. After Harold died from pancreatic cancer 15 years ago, this house became both my refuge and my reminder. We had bought it as our retirement dream, but instead of growing old together, I raised our daughter, Lauren, alone, in a house meant for 2. I traded date nights for PTA meetings, weekend hikes for double shifts. I taught high school English for 3 decades and came home every night to help with science projects and heartbreaks. My life, since Harold's passing, was devoted entirely to making sure Lauren never felt the emptiness I did. That's why the text from her felt like sunlight breaking through a long stretch of gray. Mom, Caleb and I were talking. We think it's time we all take that Italy trip together. You, me, him, and maybe even baby Georgia if we can swing it. What do you think? I stared at it for a long time, not quite believing it. We had talked about Italy for years. Lauren had always said she wanted us to see the Colosseum together, that she couldn't imagine walking through Florence without her bookworm mama guiding her through Dante's world. But life had a way of pushing dreams further down the calendar. Now, it was happening. I texted back a short, "Yes, I'd love to," because if I had said more, I would have cried. The next few weeks passed in a blur of lists and bookings. I offered to handle the logistics. It's what I was good at. I found charming little hotels with balconies overlooking cobbled streets, reserved a table at that trattoria in Trastevere, Lorraine, once mentioned, even picked out a gelato tour for Georgia if she ended up joining us. I felt useful again, not just as a bank account, but as a mother with something to give beyond money. Shopping for the trip was a joy I hadn't expected. I bought a new coat, navy blue, knee-length, perfect for chilly Roman evenings. A silk scarf with tiny hand-stitched violets caught my eye in a downtown boutique, and I imagined myself wearing it at a cafe while sipping espresso and listening to Lauren recount our day. I even splurged on a pair of comfortable but stylish shoes because Florence, I had read, was unforgiving on the feet. Every piece I packed held a little sliver of hope, as if each folded blouse or travel-size lotion was a stitch mending the distance that had grown between us over the years. Maybe this trip would be the bridge. Maybe I wasn't just the woman who paid bills and babysat. Maybe I was still Mom, the person whose presence mattered. One evening, I sat on the edge of my bed, the open suitcase beside me. The sky outside burned orange, the last fingers of sunlight stretching over the horizon. My radio played soft jazz. I had just placed the violet scarf on top of my neatly folded clothes, smoothing it with both hands. I remember thinking, this is what happiness feels like when it creeps in slowly. My phone buzzed beside the lamp. I reached for it casually, expecting a reminder or maybe a sweet travel meme from Lauren. And then the words, "Mom, don't come. Caleb says it's a nuclear family trip." That was the message. No punctuation, no context, just 12 words that unraveled the entire future I had carefully, lovingly imagined. I blinked. read it again. My hands went cold. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe she meant to send it to someone else. Maybe there was a second message coming, one that would laugh and say, "Oops, ignore that, you're totally coming, Mom." But my phone stayed silent, just the sound of the waves beyond the window and the soft murmur of jazz that suddenly felt mocking. I tried calling. No answer. I waited 5 minutes, then 10, still nothing. Something inside me fought to hold steady, to give her the benefit of the doubt. But then I made the mistake of opening Facebook. Right there, front and center, was Lauren's latest post, geo-tagged in Rome. The picture was bright, beautiful. Lauren and Caleb stood in front of the Colosseum, arms wrapped tightly around each other. On one side were Caleb's parents, smiling like this was a family tradition, everyone dressed stylishly for the camera. And there was Georgia, my granddaughter, perched on Caleb's mother's hip. I stared at the image, heart pounding. My finger froze above the screen. Below the photo was a caption, "First stop on our dream family trip. Rome, you're magic." Dream family trip. I kept scrolling, breath shallow. There they were at the Trevi fountain, tossing coins over their shoulders. At a trattoria with red-checked tablecloths, my trattoria, the one I had called to book months ago. Smiling over gelato cones from that exact vendor I had circled on the city map. The same lavender shop, the same vintage bookstore. My notes, my plan, my dream, and not a trace of me. A hollow ache spread through my chest, slow and thick. I sat perfectly still, the tablet growing heavier in my hands with every scroll. Each picture felt like a knife with a familiar handle. They hadn't just gone without me. They had taken my itinerary, every ounce of my effort, and repackaged it like it had never involved me at all. I reached for the printed itinerary I had taped to my fridge. I had decorated it with little sticky notes. "Don't forget comfy shoes," and "Surprise Lauren with cafe visit here." Now it looked like the blueprint for someone else's joy. I walked back to my bedroom, where the suitcase still sat open on the bed. The violet scarf lay where I'd smoothed it only an hour earlier. The room still glowed gold from the dying light outside, but it no longer felt warm. With mechanical hands, I reached down, picked up the scarf, and held it tight between my fingers. The fabric was soft, but it didn't offer comfort, only a bitter irony. I had chosen it thinking of Florence, imagining myself in the frame of all those photos they were now taking, without me. The scarf slipped from my hand. It fluttered onto the floor, a slow, silent fall. I didn't bend to retrieve it. I simply stared. That night, I didn't cook dinner. I didn't pour wine or reheat soup. I sat on the couch, lights off, the only glow coming from my phone screen as more photos continued to flood in. Lauren didn't even try to hide it. There was no guilt in her eyes, no hint of loss. Somewhere around midnight, I stopped looking. Instead, I walked out to the porch, the air cool and briny. I wrapped my arms around myself and listened to the sea until the silence became a kind of balm. The waves didn't ask questions. They didn't erase me from their rhythm. They kept coming, steady and true. That was when I realized the most painful part wasn't being left out. It was knowing that I wasn't missed. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of thought, mind spiraling in loops that always ended with the same question. When did I stop being her mother and become just a resource? I shuffled to the kitchen, turned on the coffee pot, and stared at the framed photo above the sink. Lauren, at 9 years old, missing a front tooth, holding a spelling bee trophy with both hands like it was an Olympic medal. Her cheeks were flushed with pride, her eyes looking straight at me. That photo used to make me smile. Now, it felt like a relic from a different lifetime. As the coffee brewed, I sat at the table and opened my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, maybe distraction, maybe answers. Without thinking, I pulled up my bank account. Just routine. Bills, mortgage payment, nothing unusual. Then I saw it. The emergency credit card, the one I had given Lauren 10 years ago, just in case, had a balance 3 times higher than usual. My stomach knotted. I clicked into the transaction history. There it was, plain as day. The Ritz-Carlton in Rome. 2 nights executive suite, low $100. Designer boutique, $650s. Michelin-starred dinner, $470s. Luxury spa, $300. It went on and on, each charge another slap. Each line another reminder that I hadn't just been excluded from the trip, I had helped pay for it. I scrolled back further and saw charges from weeks before their departure. New luggage, international SIM cards, premium airline upgrades, all on my card. I pushed the chair back from the table, my hand covering my mouth. The coffee in the pot had finished brewing, but I didn't pour a cup. I couldn't. My hands were shaking. I had sold my wedding ring to help Lauren finish college. It was a modest band, nothing flashy, but it had been Harold's. When she called crying one night, overwhelmed by student loans, I walked into the pawn shop the next day without hesitation. It's just a ring, I had told myself. My daughter's future matters more. When she and Caleb were house hunting and came up short on a down payment, I wrote a check without flinching. When Caleb lost his job during the recession, I sent the money monthly, tucking envelopes into the mail without a return address, pretending they were anonymous blessings. That's what love looks like, doesn't it? Quiet, consistent, invisible. But this was something else. This wasn't need. It was indulgence. It was entitlement. I stared at the screen a long time, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. My chest ached, not with rage, but with that deep, sinking weight only betrayal can bring. Not the sharp slice of anger, something heavier, slower, like grief. Without another thought, I clicked the freeze card button. A confirmation popped up. Are you sure you want to temporarily disable this card? Yes, I clicked. Card status, frozen. It felt anticlimactic. No dramatic sound effect. No flashing red alert. Just a quiet update. Your card has been disabled. And just like that, a door closed. I leaned back, pressing my palms flat on the table to keep steady. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Outside, the waves rolled on, unaware that something fundamental inside me had just shifted. There was no plan, no grand gesture. Just a mother sitting alone at her kitchen table, choosing, for the first time in decades, not to give. The phone rang less than an hour after I froze the card. I recognized Lauren's number immediately. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail to keep my silence a little longer. But something in me needed to hear her voice. Maybe some part of me still hoped she'd explain that there was a misunderstanding, that she didn't know the card was being used, that she cared. Hello? I answered quietly. She didn't bother with a greeting. Did you freeze the emergency card? Her tone was sharp, clipped, with no trace of warmth. I hesitated. Yes. A pause. And then the fury came flooding in. What the hell, Mom? We're on the other side of the world with a toddler. We were about to check out of the hotel and your card got declined. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? We had to pay out of pocket and cancel dinner because of you. I didn't realize the card was for 5-star hotels, I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. It was for emergencies, she snapped. And that qualifies as an emergency? Lauren scoffed, the sound sharp in my ear. You ruined everything. You always do. This was supposed to be a perfect trip, and you've made it all about you. You can't stand not being the center of attention, can you? My breath caught in my throat. Me? The center of attention? Lauren, I began, but she cut me off. If you don't reinstate that card in the next hour, don't bother calling me again. Don't come visit. Don't expect photos of Georgia. You'll be out of our lives. Do you understand? This is your choice. And then, click. Silence. It wasn't yelling that hurt me most. It was how cold her voice was, how transactional, like she wasn't speaking to her mother, but to a malfunctioning ATM. My chest felt tight, my lungs struggling to fill. I sat there stunned, phone still pressed to my ear even though the line had long since gone dead. The kitchen, the waves, the quiet of the house, they all felt further away now, as if I had been pushed into some alternate version of my life where everything looked the same but felt completely hollow. I didn't cry. Not right away. My emotions didn't know what to do with themselves. They circled. Shock, anger, shame. Never landing long enough for me to process one before the next took over. About an hour later, my phone buzzed again. A different number this time. I debated answering, but curiosity won. Ginny. Caleb's voice came through, low and far more composed than Lauren's had been. I wanted to reach out. I didn't say anything. I know she came in too hot, he continued. She's just stressed. This trip meant a lot to her. And it meant nothing to me, I said quietly. There was a pause. I get it, he said, avoiding my question entirely. Look, I'm not calling to argue. I just want you to understand where she's coming from. I stayed silent. Caleb sighed. Lauren's been working really hard on her online brand. The family blog, the Instagram partnerships. She's built something meaningful. Sponsors, followers, engagement numbers. This trip is a big part of that. And I don't fit that brand, I said, the words like gravel in my throat. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He didn't deny it. She wanted the photos to tell a story, Caleb said finally. A perfect family getaway. The kind brands love. The kind people click on. You know how it is. Clean lines, color-coordinated outfits, generational symmetry. But not too much age. Not too much reality. He sighed again. You're not the problem, but you don't match the vision she's trying to project. There it was, the final twist of the knife. I wasn't excluded because of logistics or limited space or even Caleb's preferences. I had been cut out of the frame, literally, because I didn't look the part, because I didn't enhance the image. My gray hair, my soft posture, my age, my presence would have cluttered the aesthetic, spoiled the caption, broken the illusion. I gave her everything, I whispered, not even sure if he could hear me. I know, Caleb said, and his voice was softer now, almost guilty. I just wanted to explain, I'm sorry. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone for a long time after that. Not in shock anymore, just quiet clarity, the kind that settles over you like snowfall, cold, steady, and inescapable. I thought about every bedtime story, every science project, every packed lunch, every birthday cake, the long nights holding Lauren while she sobbed after her first heartbreak, the joy in her eyes when Georgia was born, the gratitude in her voice when I helped cover her hospital bills. And now, none of it mattered because I didn't fit a brand guideline? I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a blemish on a curated feed. Later that night, I sat on my bed and watched the waves roll in. I didn't touch my phone again. I didn't check for messages. I just sat in silence, one hand resting on the scarf I never got to wear. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like reaching out to fix it. The following morning, I woke with a strange sense of stillness. Not the kind that wraps you in peace, but the kind that comes just before a decision finally finds its footing. It was as if something inside me had settled, not in resignation, in resolve. I poured a cup of coffee and sat at the dining table, staring at the blank legal pad in front of me. For the past few days, I had been ricocheting between shock and sadness, confusion and hurt. But now, there was only clarity. It began with a single thought. What do I still control? I walked into the back room where I kept the family records, the labeled folders with old tax returns, life insurance policies, and property deeds. I pulled out the file labeled Lauren and Caleb, Portland House. The moment I saw the top line, I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. My name was still there. In fact, it was the only name on the title. Ginny Harper, sole owner. I had purchased the house in Lauren's name as a wedding gift, intending to transfer it when they settled down. But the transfer had never happened. Lauren said it made her nervous to deal with legal forms during pregnancy. Then came Georgia, then job changes, then the pandemic. It had simply never been finalized. I smiled, but it wasn't a triumphant smile. It was sad, quiet. A smile that recognized the irony. For all her desire to curate her image, Lauren had overlooked one of the most fundamental things. The home she lived in wasn't hers. I set the deed on the table. My hands didn't shake. It was time to reclaim something, not out of vengeance, but to remind myself that I wasn't powerless. That afternoon, I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer, Henry Clark. Henry and I had been classmates back in university, both English majors who drifted toward very different paths. He went on to law school, I to teaching. We had lost touch for decades until I saw his name in the local paper a few years ago, announcing his retirement from a prestigious Portland law firm. I'd run into him at a farmer's market a few months back. We chatted about books, about the ocean air, about aging gracefully. Now, I was calling with purpose. "Ginny Harper," Henry's voice was still rich with that warm southern twang. "You caught me just as I was about to prune my tomatoes." "I won't keep you long," I said with a soft chuckle. "I just need a bit of guidance. Legal, if you're up for it." "For you?" "Always," he said, without missing a beat. "What's going on?" I explained everything. Not the emotional side, not yet, but the facts. That I owned a house, that my daughter and her husband were living there rent-free, that I wanted to serve a formal 60-day notice of eviction and possibly list the home for sale. There was a pause on the line when I finished. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked gently. "I'm sure I need to," I said. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, shifting into professional mode, "legally, you're within your rights. Oregon requires a 60-day notice for no-cause eviction if tenants have been in residence more than a year. You'll need to deliver it in writing, ideally certified mail. I can help you draft it." "I'd appreciate that." He paused again. "Do you want me to represent you officially?" "Not yet," I said. "Just help me draw the boundary." He let out a breath. "Understood. And Ginny, I'm proud of you." That made something catch in my throat. I thanked him, hung up, and sat quietly for a moment, letting the weight of the step I was about to take settle around me. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like gravity. The next day, I called a local real estate agent I trusted and scheduled a meeting for later that week. I also contacted a moving company, one I had used years ago when downsizing after Harold died. The man on the phone remembered me. "You're the lady with all the books," he said with a laugh. "Still got the big oak shelf?" "Still got it," I said. "Still too many books." "We'll take care of you," he promised. By the end of that week, every detail was in motion. Henry had emailed me a clean draft of the notice, written in precise, neutral language that was impossible to dispute. The envelope was ready. I would send it certified, with delivery confirmation. No surprises, just the truth in writing. The act of preparing it gave me back something I hadn't realized I'd lost: control over my own narrative. My silence wasn't passive anymore. It had shape. It had power. I sat on the porch that evening with the envelope in my lap, looking out at the horizon as the sun dipped behind the waves. The wind was cool, the sky streaked with pink and violet. Toby, the golden retriever mix from the shelter I visited weekly, sat at my feet. I hadn't brought him home yet, but I was considering it. "So you'd like the coast," I murmured to him, imagining the leash in my hand, the mornings together. Inside the house, the radio hummed. The kitchen smelled faintly of ginger tea. The envelope on my lap bore my signature. Ownership, I realized, isn't always about land or money. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your place in your own story. The following morning, Henry called again. His voice was calm but carried an undertone of something heavier, more deliberate. "Ginny," he began, "I did a little digging. I hope that's okay." "Of course," I said, though I wasn't sure what he meant. There was something that caught my attention when I reviewed the property file. A legal inquiry was made 6 months ago. Caleb had contacted a title attorney in Portland. He attempted to start a transfer of the deed. My breath caught. To Lauren's name? Yes, Henry confirmed, but the paperwork was never completed. He tried to submit a limited power of attorney that would allow Lauren to sign on your behalf, but it wasn't properly notarized, and it was questionable, to be frank. The attorney flagged it, reached out to verify, but never got a response, so it died on the vine. My grip tightened on the phone. They were going to take the house, I murmured. They were at least trying to make it legally theirs without your input, Henry said gently. You should be aware of that. Thank you, I said, voice low. I needed to know. We hung up and I sat with the weight of that new truth. For all the years I had believed Lauren was simply negligent, too busy to transfer the title, too distracted to manage paperwork. There had been something more intentional beneath the surface, or worse, calculated, and it wasn't just her. Caleb had played a role in this too. The charming son-in-law who always said thank you, who called me mom with a smile. How much of that smile had been camouflage? I returned to my bedroom and opened the small cedar chest at the foot of my bed, my memory box. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were pieces of my life I couldn't bear to part with. Harold's last letter, George's newborn booties, and a tattered notebook with a glittery dolphin on the cover. I hadn't seen that notebook since Lauren was a child. It had been her first journal, something I gave her when she was 9, after she saw me writing in mine. She used to write poetry, dreams, little lists of things she loved. I opened the first page. In her uneven, looping handwriting were the words, "Things I want when I grow up. A puppy, a purple bike, a house with a big window, to go to Italy with Mom, to be a writer." My fingers traced the 4th line. I blinked hard. To go to Italy with Mom. The page blurred. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, the journal resting on my knees. The handwriting was clumsy, but the intention was pure. The dream was real. There had been a time, long before sponsorships and curated images and social media influence, when the only thing Lauren wanted was to hold my hand in a faraway place and say, "We made it, Mom." I wasn't sure when that little girl had disappeared, when that desire turned into a performance, when I became a prop in her story instead of the heart of it. I closed the journal and held it to my chest. For the first time since I mailed the eviction notice, I felt hesitation, not guilt, just sorrow. A part of me longed to call her, to tell her I found the notebook, to remind her of who she used to be, to ask her if any of that little girl was still there. But then I remembered the hotel charges, the Instagram posts, the phone call laced with threats, the attempted transfer of the house behind my back. Somewhere along the way, Lauren had rewritten the narrative, and in her version, I didn't exist. I stood up and placed the journal back in the chest, gently, as though laying something to rest. There would be no confrontation, no dramatic showdown, just a quiet, resolute choice. I would continue with the plan, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I needed to protect the only thing I had left intact, my dignity. That afternoon, I met with the realtor and signed the preliminary listing agreement. The movers confirmed the schedule. I bought a lockbox for the front door and arranged for a local friend to check in weekly until the house sold. As I left the property one last time, I paused at the front steps, hand resting on the door frame. I whispered, goodbye. Not to the house, but to the past version of me that thought love meant erasing boundaries. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows over the lawn. I turned, walked to my car, and drove away without looking back. 60 days came and went like waves on the shore, constant, inevitable, each one bringing me closer to a moment I had both dreaded and prepared for. The house in Portland stood just as I remembered it, but emptier somehow, stripped of the life I once hoped my daughter would build there with love, not entitlement. The moving truck had come and gone. Everything inside was now neatly boxed, labeled, and stacked inside a climate-controlled storage unit registered under their names. I hadn't touched anything beyond what was necessary. No spite, no sabotage, just precision. I stood in the driveway in a light sweater, the Oregon sky heavy with low-hanging clouds. The lockbox on the front door gleamed silver in the gray light. It felt like a final punctuation mark. Then I heard it, the low hum of a taxi slowing to a stop. The car pulled up at the curb. The trunk popped open. Lauren stepped out first, sunglasses on, phone in hand, her lips pursed as if she was already irritated. Caleb followed, slower, carrying 2 suitcases. They hadn't noticed me yet. When Lauren finally looked up and saw me, she froze mid-step. "Mom?" she said, disbelief cutting into her tone. Caleb looked up too, but said nothing. I took a step forward, calm but grounded. "The movers came 2 days ago. Everything's been placed in a storage unit not far from here. You'll find the address and keys inside this envelope." I handed it to Lauren. She stared at the envelope as if it might burn her fingers. "What is this? What did you do?" Her voice wasn't confused. It was accusatory, as though I had stolen something precious instead of reclaiming what was mine. I kept my tone even. "I followed the legal process. You received notice. I gave the required 60 days. Nothing here belongs to you anymore." Caleb looked down at his shoes. He still hadn't spoken. Lauren's composure cracked. She stepped closer, her voice rising. "You're kidding me. You actually went through with it? You evicted your own daughter?" "No," I said. "I took back a home I paid for. One I allowed you to live in freely, one you tried to take from me behind my back." Her mouth opened, then closed. She knew I knew. "You're being vindictive," she hissed. "You're punishing us." I shook my head. "No, I'm choosing peace. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing not to be used." That's when Lauren broke. Her voice climbed higher, sharp and frantic. "You had no right to humiliate us like this. We come home from a trip, one that you sabotaged, and find strangers walking out of our house with boxes. Are you proud of yourself?" Behind her, Caleb remained still. The taxi driver lingered at the curb, watching through the side mirror, awkward and unsure. I looked Lauren in the eyes. "You told me I was no longer your family if I didn't give you what you wanted. I'm just honoring that boundary." Her face flushed with anger. She looked to Caleb for backup. That's when the twist came. Not from me, but from him. He didn't say a word. He picked up the second suitcase, stepped back from Lauren, and turned away. Not toward me, just away. Lauren whipped around, incredulous. "Caleb, say something." He didn't. His silence was louder than any shout. She turned back to me, suddenly less sure, her posture no longer towering. "You don't get to do this. You're my mother." I nodded slowly. "Then maybe you should have treated me like one." She didn't respond. The quiet that fell between us was deafening. No more accusations, no more threats, just the cold, hard space between what was and what would never be again. I turned to go. As I reached the car, I glanced once more at the house, not because I wanted to look back, but because I knew it would be the last time I saw it. When I drove off, the rearview mirror held the shrinking figures of my daughter and her husband standing in a driveway that no longer belonged to them. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilt. I felt free. I didn't drive far. Just a few blocks down to a quiet public park where the view of the neighborhood was still visible behind a row of cottonwood trees. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat in silence. My breath had steadied, but inside there was still a tremor, a kind of aftershock from the confrontation. I was proud of how I had handled myself. I hadn't shouted, I hadn't lashed out. I had done exactly what I said I would do, kept things clean, legal and respectful. But I wasn't expecting what came next. A knock on the driver's side window made me jump. I turned to see Caleb standing there, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched. I rolled the window down halfway. He didn't meet my eyes right away, just stared off at the trees. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "Good," I replied, "because I'm done with that." He nodded, then leaned slightly closer, his voice lowering to a near whisper. I wanted to say something. For me. I waited. "I used to admire you," he said quietly. "The way you raised Lauren. How grounded you were. Even your stupid tea collection, I thought it was charming." The ghost of a smile touched my lips, but I didn't speak. He went on. "But Lauren, she never really wanted to share the spotlight. Not even with Georgia sometimes. You being around, especially on the Italy trip, it would have made the story about you. She didn't want that." My throat tightened. I wasn't sure which part hurt more, that Lauren viewed me as competition, or that Caleb knew and did nothing. "She told me once," he added, "that your presence in photos would age the brand, that it didn't feel aspirational." I inhaled sharply. "Aspirational?" Caleb shrugged. "It's how she thinks now, numbers, aesthetics. Followers, clean lines, happy faces. If someone doesn't fit, she edits them out, even her own mother." His eyes finally met mine. "I'm sorry, Ginny." I didn't reply. I rolled up the window slowly, and he stepped back without protest. As I pulled away, I didn't look back at him. I had no more room in my heart for performative guilt. That night, I sat on my porch back home, wrapped in a blanket, Toby curled at my feet. I sipped a cup of chamomile tea and scrolled idly through my phone. I wasn't looking for anything, just letting the quiet fill in the spaces where pain had recently lived. Then I saw it. A post on Lauren's public Instagram account, her smiling face, mascara streaked but soft in candlelight. Captioned beneath, "Some wounds can't be explained. Today my mother threw us out of our home. No warning, no reason, just gone." If you've ever been broken by someone who should have protected you, know you're not alone. Family trauma amps truth hurts. Starting over. My hands went still. Hundreds of comments poured in. Hearts, prayers, strangers offering love and outrage. "She doesn't deserve you. You're so strong." This broke me. Not one word of it true. No mention of the 60-day notice. No mention of the free rent for years, the paid bills, the credit card. No mention of the house still being in my name. No mention of her silence when I had been excluded, erased. Just a curated narrative, crafted to ignite sympathy and engagement. I could have responded. I could have posted screenshots, legal forms, photos of the letter I sent. I could have turned the public tide, but I didn't. Instead, I called Henry. "I need a favor," I said. "Tell me." "I want to send the notice of ownership and all related documentation to one place, her PR agency, quietly. No public sharing, just clarity." Henry was silent for a moment. "That's very strategic." "No," I said softly. "It's self-respect. I'm not trying to win an argument. I just want the truth to exist where it matters." "I'll handle it," he replied. And he did. Within 24 hours, Lauren's agency received a full folder, notarized documents, email threads, certified mail receipts, and a brief legal summary, fact, not opinion. I never heard back, but I noticed something. 3 days later, the Instagram post was deleted. No apology, no explanation, just gone. The comments disappeared with it. The sympathy evaporated into the same curated void from which it had come. I didn't feel vindicated. That wasn't the point. What I felt was steadiness, a quiet strength rooted in restraint, the knowledge that truth doesn't need to shout to exist. I poured another cup of tea. Toby shifted closer, resting his head on my foot. The waves rolled in, steady and unbothered. Let her have her audience. Let her write her stories. I had finally begun to live mine. The RV wasn't much to look at, paint faded, curtains a little sun-bleached, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt something stir deep within me. It smelled like old coffee and vinyl, with a hint of lavender from the sachets the previous owner had left behind. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a step down. To me, it felt like freedom. I signed the paperwork with calm certainty, slid the key into the ignition, and listened to the engine rumble to life. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a turning point. Toby hopped into the passenger seat as if he'd been born for the open road. His tail thumped against the worn cushion, tongue lolling out, eyes bright. We didn't have a set route, no strict itinerary, just the road, and whatever we chose to make of it. Our first stop was Utah. I parked the RV near Moab, where the red rock formations carved out shadows against the sky like prehistoric monuments. I hiked short trails in the early morning with Toby trotting beside me, his leash loose, his spirit free. We watched the sun rise over Arches National Park, both of us breathless, not from exertion, but from awe. From there, we drifted east into Colorado. I stopped at a small town nestled in the Rockies, where the air was thin but filled with warmth. At a local diner, I struck up conversation with a woman named Edie, 72, bright red lipstick, 3 ex-husbands, and a contagious laugh. We sat on the diner's porch for hours. "He left me after 40 years, she said, sipping sweet tea. "Traded me for a yoga instructor who can't cook and can't spell. I cried for 6 months, then bought a Harley." I laughed until I cried. In Texas, I pulled into a KOA campground on a whim and found myself parked beside a woman named Maria, who had turned her RV into a mobile craft shop. She painted floral designs on old tin cans, embroidered pillowcases with sarcastic quotes, and had a heart big enough to hug the whole state. "You're not running," Maria told me one night around a fire. "You're just finally moving in the right direction." That sentence stayed with me. At every stop, I met women like me, mothers, widows, divorcees. Some had been abandoned, others had chosen solitude, but all of us shared a common thread. We had once given everything to someone who eventually decided it wasn't enough. We swapped stories, recipes, and scars. We laughed loud, cried without shame. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a mother, not as a caretaker, but as a person, a woman, Ginny. One morning, parked under a pecan tree outside a rest stop in New Mexico, I received an email from a woman named Cheryl. She was the admin of a private Facebook group I had joined months ago called Widowed Strong. I rarely posted. Mostly I just read and nodded along. But last week, on a late-night whim, I had uploaded a photo of my RV, Toby in the front seat, me standing outside holding a cup of coffee, with the caption, "This is what reclaiming looks like." Cheryl's message was simple. "Your photo struck a nerve. We'd love to feature your story. Would you be open to that?" I hesitated at first, but then I remembered all the women I had met on the road, the Edies and Marias, and all the ones yet to come. I replied, yes. Within 2 days, my post was live on the group's homepage. Then it was shared on their public page. Then it was picked up by a lifestyle blog. The shares rolled in, the comments flooded, and my inbox filled with messages from women across the country. This gave me courage. "Thank you for showing it's never too late." I thought I was alone. The attention didn't make me feel famous. It made me feel useful. For the first time in a long, long time, I was helping someone. Not by paying a bill, not by sacrificing quietly, but by simply existing, authentically. The high of the viral post lingered like a warm breeze, gentle, affirming. Each message I received was another breath of clarity, another reminder that the road I had taken wasn't lonely, it was liberating. Then Lauren's email arrived. No subject line, no greeting, just a single line in the body of the message. "Are there any other properties you plan to take back?" I stared at it for a long time, blinking slowly as if rereading it might reveal something I missed, some subtext, some apology hidden in invisible ink. But no, just that, a transactional query as if I were a bank officer or a landlord, not her mother. She wasn't asking how I was. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't reaching for reconciliation. She was drawing battle lines again, keeping score. I could have ignored her. Instead, I typed one line back. I'm not taking anything. I'm just not giving anymore. Then I hit send. No punctuation, no emotion, just fact. That night, parked in a quiet stretch of Arizona desert, I built a small fire just outside the RV. Toby curled up beside me, his head resting on my thigh. The stars shimmered above us, unbothered and eternal. There, in the silence, I let the weight of that email go. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I simply chose not to carry what didn't belong to me anymore. The next morning, I received another message, this one from a small local radio station in Colorado Springs. A producer had read my post and asked if I would be willing to tell my story on air. They wanted to highlight women over 60 who had chosen a new path in life. I was flattered and hesitant. I said I'd think about it. An hour later, a second invitation came in. This one from a group I had joined recently called Golden Voices, a podcast created by and for older women. The host, a 74-year-old widow named Bernice, had read my story and wanted me to join her for a recorded fireside-style conversation. No bright lights, no pressure. Just two women, two microphones, and some honest truth. That felt right. I declined the first offer and accepted Bernice's. The recording took place in the back room of a small bookstore in Santa Fe. There were no producers, no scripts, just Bernice, a cup of mint tea, and a gentle invitation to speak. I'm not a hero, I said during the interview. I didn't rise from ashes. I didn't run from disaster. I simply woke up one day and realized I wasn't required to keep handing out pieces of myself just because someone asked. Bernice nodded slowly. That's not weakness, she said. That's wisdom. The episode aired 3 weeks later. I didn't expect much from it. I figured it would find a few ears, maybe stir a few hearts. But the response surprised even me. Emails, letters, even handwritten notes delivered to mail drops I had set up along my route. Messages from women, many older than me, saying things like, I thought it was too late to leave. I didn't know I could say no. Thank you for showing me what freedom looks like. One woman named Irene wrote, my daughter hasn't spoken to me in 10 years. I always thought I had to earn my way back into her life. You reminded me that I don't. I am still someone, even without her. I read that note by the campfire a few nights later, the desert wind cool against my cheeks. I held it in one hand, Toby's soft fur beneath the other. The RV glowed behind me, a warm circle of light in the vast dark. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt whole. I hadn't expected to rebuild my life out here on the road. I hadn't expected to find a tribe of women who spoke the same quiet language of loss and rediscovery. But somehow, in the space between departure and destination, I had found something I didn't know I was looking for. Belonging. Not to a person, not to a family, but to myself. And that, I realized, was enough. It had been almost exactly 1 year since I had pulled away from the house in Portland for the last time. In that year, I had watched the seasons change, not from behind window panes, but through the windshield of my RV. Toby in the passenger seat, maps folded on the dash, coffee steaming in a tin cup near my elbow. The road had softened something in me. Time had too, not dulled the hurt entirely, but rearranged it, like smoothing creases in a well-worn quilt. What used to ache with betrayal now simply pulsed with memory. That morning, I parked near the Oregon coast where it all began, the same little stretch of beach just beyond the boardwalk where Harold and I had once held hands on foggy mornings. The same bench I used to walk past with Lauren in a stroller. The same place I had sat 1,000 times alone. Toby bounded ahead, tail high, nose to the sand. I followed slowly, the wind teasing loose strands of gray hair from under my knit cap. The smell of salt water wrapped around me like an old song. When I saw her sitting there, I stopped in my tracks. Lauren, alone. Her back was straight, arms folded in her lap. She wasn't crying, wasn't texting, just sitting. Her hair was longer, darker, pulled back in a low bun. Her clothes were simple. No curated look, no photo-ready smile. Just a woman on a bench, facing the ocean. I didn't speak. Neither did she. I walked to the opposite end of the bench and sat. The wood was cool beneath me. The wind pressed gently against us as if reminding both of us to breathe. We sat like that for several minutes, two silhouettes against a churning sea, saying nothing, letting the waves talk for us. Finally, Lauren reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She didn't hand it to me, just placed it gently between us, fingers lingering on the edge before she let go. "I didn't come here to apologize," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I nodded. "I know." She looked down at her lap. "I still don't know how to explain everything or fix it. I'm not even sure I want to. But Georgia," her voice caught, "she's been asking about you." That's when I picked up the paper. I unfolded it carefully, unsure of what I'd find. But the handwriting told me instantly. It wasn't Lauren's. It was blocky, uneven, with misspelled words and doodles in the margins. It was Georgia's. "Dear Grandma, Mom said you went to find stories. Did you find good ones? I miss your stories. And I miss Toby and your pancakes. Do you have a house on wheels? That's funny. Can I come see it? Love, Georgia." There was a heart drawn next to her name and a little stick figure of a dog with Toby scrawled above it. My hands trembled as I held the letter. "She hid it in her backpack," Lauren said quietly. "Her teacher found it during a supply check and gave it to me. Said Georgia talked about you like you were her favorite book." I smiled despite myself. A cracked, aching smile that reached places I'd kept locked. "I didn't show her the Instagram post," Lauren added. "She doesn't know any of that. To her, you're just Grandma. The one who makes up stories about talking raccoons and turns blueberry pancakes into magic spells." Silence returned, but it felt different now, warmer somehow. "I can't change what I did," she said after a while. "I won't pretend I didn't hurt you. I just thought you should read that." I folded the letter slowly and tucked it into my coat pocket, close to my heart. "I'm not the same person I was," I said softly. "Not bitter, not angry, but I'm also not waiting anymore. I've moved forward." Lauren nodded. I figured. Another gust of wind blew between us, kicking up a swirl of sand. Toby trotted over, tongue out, tail wagging. He paused in front of Lauren, tilting his head. She smiled, knelt, and scratched behind his ears. "I didn't expect him to remember me," she whispered. "He remembers everyone," I replied. "He just chooses who to stay close to." She stood again, brushing the sand from her hands. "I don't expect anything, Mom. I mean that. No second chances. No visits. Not if you don't want them." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time, not as the girl I raised or the woman who hurt me, but as someone in between, flawed, unsure, trying. "I won't go backward," I said. "I know," she replied, "but maybe someday you'll let Georgia walk forward to meet you." With that, she turned and walked away. No tears, no drama, just the quiet retreat of someone who finally understood the value of silence. I watched her disappear down the boardwalk. Then I looked at Toby, then at the letter in my pocket. The stories weren't over. Not yet. It was 2 weeks after Lauren and I sat on that bench when the knock came. I had parked the RV near the dunes of Cannon Beach, just beyond the tall grasses that swayed in rhythm with the Pacific wind. The late afternoon sun stretched golden fingers across the sand, and I was inside boiling water for tea when I heard it. 3 soft knocks against the metal door. Toby barked once, then leapt down from the bench and wagged his tail, ears perked. I opened the door slowly, and there she was, Georgia. She wore a yellow raincoat over her pajamas, mismatched socks, and clutched a small stuffed otter in her hand. Her curls had grown longer, her face fuller with the stretch of time, but her eyes, wide, bright, hopeful, were the same. "Grandma," she said softly. I dropped to one knee, arms open. She didn't hesitate. She threw herself into my embrace with the kind of force only children can muster, the kind that says, "I missed you in every moment I didn't know how to say I missed you." I wrapped my arms around her and held tight, her small frame pressed into mine, her fingers gripping the back of my sweater. I felt her breath hiccup once, twice. "I missed your stories," she mumbled into my neck. Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. "I brought new ones," I whispered. "So many." When I looked up, Lauren stood 10 feet away near the gravel road, hands clasped in front of her. She didn't step forward, didn't wave. She just stood there and watched. For once, she wasn't trying to control the moment. She wasn't curating it, directing it, polishing it for public consumption. She was simply quiet, and that silence said everything. Later that afternoon, I took Georgia for a walk along the beach. Toby ran ahead, chasing foam, barking at seagulls. We found a driftwood log and sat with our shoes off, toes buried in the cool sand. "Can we sleep in your house with wheels?" she asked, grinning. "Someday," I said with a smile, "but today I have a surprise." I pulled a small envelope from my coat pocket and handed it to her. She looked confused, then opened it with careful hands. Inside was a watercolor sketch, my beach house painted with soft strokes, the ocean shimmering behind it. Beneath the picture, in delicate script, it read, "To Georgia, for the stories still unwritten. Love, Grandma." She turned the card over and frowned. "Is it a drawing?" "It's a gift," I said gently. "The house by the sea, it's yours now. Not today, not tomorrow. But one day it will be waiting for you." Her eyes widened. "Really? Really?" From behind us, footsteps approached. I turned to see Lauren walking slowly toward the log. She had heard everything. Her face was unreadable. She looked from the sketch to me, then to Georgia. "You gave it to her?" she asked, voice steady but tight. I nodded. "The papers were signed months ago. I worked with Henry to put it in a trust. She'll get it when she's old enough." Lauren swallowed. "But you said you weren't giving anymore." "I'm not giving to people who take," I replied calmly. "I'm giving to someone who listens, who loves." Her gaze dropped to the sand. For the first time in all our years, she wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. She was stunned. Because for once she wasn't at the center of the orbit. The world didn't spin around her anymore. "You really mean it," she said, more to herself than to me. "Yes," I answered, "because some things shouldn't be earned. They should be passed on with love." She nodded slowly, then turned and walked back toward the trail without saying another word. Georgia leaned against me and looked up. "Can we have a picnic here?" I smiled. "Already packed." We laid out a blanket on the sand, peanut butter sandwiches, apple slices, and lemonade in a thermos. Toby flopped beside us, snout resting on Georgia's shoe. We laughed, shared stories, made new ones. As the sun dipped lower, casting the world in golden light, I looked out over the horizon, the sound of the ocean in my ears, and the warmth of my granddaughter by my side. I picked up a shell, ran my thumb over its ridges, and whispered, "Some endings don't need revenge, just release." And with that, I let it all go.